Hello my nakamatachi, this is JoyGirl and let's get to the review of chapter 1024. In just a moment though, because we gotta first discuss our winners of the Joy Fleet artwork competition. So after last week's chapter where we saw Momonosuke's mature dragon form, we also got a hint of what adult Momonosuke may look like in human form, or the back of him at least, and I for one was very curious about this. So the rule for this week's competition was for everyone to draw what they envision an adult Momonosuke would look like in his human form. And everyone's submissions were really great, so make sure to stick around to the end of the video so that you can see everyone's submissions, but for now let's celebrate our winners. In third place, Irvin went beyond the requirements and gave us a mix of both adult Momonosuke in dragon and human form. Contrary to his facial expression, Irvin drew what is a fun idea of Momo being able to ride his own dragon form. In second place, we got Yamato the best Nakama, who is becoming a regular in our JoyGirl chapter reviews, placing a spot 3 weeks in a row. And Yamato's drawing features, if I'm not mistaken, what seems to be a Yakuza-inspired adult Momonosuke, complete with tattoos and such intense ferocity in his gaze. And before we move on to number 1, I'd like to make a quick apology for forgetting to send Rusky's artwork to our voters this week. So in the spirit of fairness, we will include Rusky's incredibly detailed entry as an honorable mention this week. So JoyGirl is a sorry girl, and I hope that this in some way makes up for it. And for the number 1 spot, we got Pokiaki. Pokiaki's submission of his very own manga page not only showcases his super talent, but also his super imagination. Because whilst we're all expecting to see some very heavy resemblance of Odin, we got a black-haired white beard. Toki, what is the meaning of this? But also, we gotta ask, what does this even mean? Why does Whitebeard's child, Momo, have black hair? And so who is the real son of Whitebeard? Momo or Weevil? Look, I'm gonna stop questioning the artist and I'm just gonna say a big congratulations. This doesn't look great for Toki, but I have to say I do dig the look for Momo. So congrats to Pookie and to all of our winners, but we all know that the real winner here is me because I get to use all of these awesome artworks in future JoyGirl chapter reviews. So thank you. And a huge thank you to everyone who submitted in another round of our Joy Fleet artwork competitions. Remember that you can join our Discord too, and you can also become a Patron member, which will give you the voting power on who wins these artwork competitions. I look forward to seeing everyone's submissions for the next week because this next theme is Yamato in chibi form in honor of this week's chapter, which is a good time for us to segue back into the chapter review. And let's talk about the main star of this chapter, which is indeed Yamato and the flashback. I want to start talking about the present time Yamato first because I really did enjoy what we've seen so far between Yamato and Kaido's fight, with my favorite moment really being that final double spread page. Because admittedly, it was hard to follow the last few chapters we've been getting, especially the epicness in panel after panel in chapter 1023, and you may have felt that for most of this chapter, but I think the balance of the warmth of the flashback and the quick action that we got between Kaido and Yamato was enough to keep us satisfied for this week, and I think Oda knew that as well, which is why we're not getting a chapter break next week. I love how we were built up for this final page throughout the chapter, with Oda subtly pointing out the stark difference in strength between the two during their back and forth. Kaido is smiling as if still enjoying himself, whilst Yamato is huffing and puffing. If Yamato attacks with a ringing arrow, which visibly has little effect on Kaido, Kaido returns it with a much stronger thunderous arrow, which forces Yamato to move and step back. This idea was strengthened by dialogue, with Yamato exclaiming, "You're trying to kill me," showing how much more intent Kaido had in his attack as opposed to Yamato. If Yamato was only trying to bring Kaido down, Kaido is actually trying to kill his own child. So throughout the fight, we saw how much stronger Kaido was, and then we get to that last page with that super hype double spread of the Conqueror's Clash. And this is the first time we've seen someone match Kaido who isn't Big Mom and Luffy, and what a way to build up Yamato. After confirmation that Kaido is really going for the kill, being added to the list of characters who are able to use Conqueror's Haki at will, this now begs the question and may actually even display that Yamato may have a case for being on par with Luffy. Personally, seeing their clash in the earlier flashback, I'd like to think Yamato is a good measure of how strong Ace would have been if he was still alive. But as for the chapter itself, in the way that we were built up for this moment, even in the last page, was so effective. The succession of panels which mirror Yamato and Kaido, with a mid-shot to show their stance and then a close-up to their respective determined faces, it feels as if these images were moving in the way that we were drawn into that clash. Oda Oda's use of contrast between light and dark is something that I've been pointing out a lot in the fights for the past couple of chapters, and we see a continuation of that here too. There's a clear contrast between Yamato and Kaido from their coloring as well as their size. Yamato's slender frame suggests a greater finesse to Kaido's brute strength, and yet at the same time each of them share both traits. Now as for that double spread, apart from the epic showing this gives of Yamato being able to cleanly match Kaido in a bout of Conqueror's Clash, what really stands out for me is to have Kaido positioned at the forefront, because this is a spot that I typically see to be saved for the heroes or the good guys, and outside of that, the winner of a clash. And I think the reason behind that is so that Oda can show us the reaction and the result of an attack through the state of the opposition in the background, whilst hyping up the good guy, or of course to highlight the winner in the foreground. So it's an interesting change up to see Kaido in this position instead, getting the majority of the attention in the stalemate ending through his size and positioning. And for me, I think this decision worked. We get a clearer look at Kaido up close, and I feel like it's building us up for Kaido's further character development, which was also hinted at here through Kaido's dialogue, where he says there are no easy answers. Of course, begging the question, what makes this a difficult question for Kaido? Whilst the build-up was for Yamato to have that moment, it was Kaido who really drove this scene for me. So if the many times that I have discussed this in a number of my videos isn't clear enough, I am really looking forward to Kaido's backstory, which I feel is even sooner than ever upon us, considering that we got Yamato's mini flashback in this chapter. So let's discuss the flashback, which is the other very significant segment of the chapter. The flashback of Yamato's childhood, the majority of which took inside a cave, which is told to us by translators' notes to be based on the Japanese legend of the Ama no Iwato and Amaterasu, which continues adding to the links between Yamato to Japanese guardian deities, and that of course raises the question of whether this all changes the likelihood of whether Yamato will be joining the Straw Hats. Yamato's introduction in the flashback as a princess further raises this question. Does the flashback make Yamato a future member of the crew, or the princess of an arc? But let's focus on the flashback because there's a lot to discuss. Which is funny because I felt that it was actually a little short, which led me to assume that this isn't the end of it and we're going to see more, perhaps in little snippets like this one, where important moments will be shown to us mid-battle. But despite that, I love the way the flashback was used, because the flashback itself also built us up for that final clash. For example, the confirmation that Yamato possesses Conqueror's Haki at the beginning, resulting in an all-out Conqueror's Haki clash at the end of the chapter. It also helps us understand Yamato's deep motivations and loyalty to those who would be Kaido's opposition, because at that stage, it didn't seem like Yamato was a full-on Oden supporter. It was like Yamato was merely playing Oden, still referring to Kaido as daddy, which has a more affectionate tone as opposed to how Yamato angrily calls Kaido by his name in the present timeline. It seems like if anything, it was Kaido's rough treatment and the contrasting kindness of the samurais that really affected Yamato's development to fully adopt Oden's persona and get serious about helping Wano. What's really interesting though is that despite this treatment, it was evident through the extended look of their fight that Yamato took inspiration from Kaido's combat style. So it really does make me want to see more of the flashback. I really want to see what makes Yamato insist so heavily on being Oden, but simultaneously develop Kaido's fighting style right down to the choice of weapon. But for now, there are some great parallels between Yamato and other characters in the series that really help us understand Yamato as a character. For example, the neglected childhood shared with Luffy, who also had to fend for himself, but at the same time, that clear difference being that this was just an example of true child abuse as opposed to some sort of tough love that Garp was hammering into Luffy through training. The single bowl of rice is now such a meaningful symbol that not only shows ties to the early scene between Luffy and Tama, but also tells us that Yamato is more like the rest of the Wano citizens who suffered under Kaido's tyranny rather than being treated like a princess. And this is something that I really appreciated. I've always talked about how Yamato's part in the war could help teach Wano citizens the lesson that children should not bear the sins of their father, which is something that arguably led to the tragedy of Wano in the first place because of the treatment of the Kurozumi family. And here we actually find out that the samurai already showed Yamato this understanding. Which brings us to the samurai, because in true One Piece fashion, this little glimpse into Yamato's childhood left us with more questions than answers. The samurai in the cave seem to be the former daimyos of Wano who revolted after Oden's execution, and a lot of them look very familiar, as if they could all be related to characters we already know. There's a clear Denjiro lookalike, for example. The short and stout figure has a more kabuki-like features, but the most significant figure whose identity is closest to being confirmed is of course the samurai who is heavily suggested to be Shimotsuki Ushimaru. His tattoo on his back, though unclear, seems to be the double-cross sword crest on the dojo in the Shimotsuki village, with some added design circling the swords. And there is an unmistakable, undeniable Zoro vibe that we get from this figure. He stands holding a sword in each hand with his back facing us is a pose we saw at the beginning of chapter 1023 with Zoro, even right down to his devilish smile and toothpick, a look we've seen on Zoro in the Wano arc. So all of this points to this figure being Shimotsuki Ushimaru, but because this hasn't been officially confirmed, I'll be referring to this certain man as Mr. Nobody for the remainder of the chapter review. The title, Nobody Important, and with the added connection to one of our main characters, now almost guarantees an irony which contradicts Mr. Nobody's own reference to himself. And as the joke was during our reaction stream, if nothing happened to Zoro, then his potential ancestor is nobody important. In all seriousness though, this does raise further questions about Zoro's lineage and how he ended up in the Shimotsuki village. If he is indeed directly related to Mr. Nobody, did the daimyo send his child or perhaps a relative to the East Blue? If it wasn't for Oda confirming that Zoro's birthplace is in the East Blue, I would be highly questioning whether Mr. Nobody sent his own child, Zoro, to the East Blue, and for what purpose, and whether this would have happened before or after he read Oden's logbook. This really does hype me up for further development of Zoro in Wano, and I'm particularly intrigued as to Yamato's future interactions with Zoro, seeing as Yamato was influenced at some point in life by someone who heavily resembles Zoro. It's a great way for Oda to not have these two interact yet and have this included in Yamato's flashback to give us more things to look forward to. The beauty of these connections is that we see Mr. Nobody say that he was captivated by Oden, and I had a thought whilst reading this panel. Because of Mr. Nobody's kindness to Yamato, who now goes by Oden, when Yamato meets Zoro, who bears a striking resemblance to Mr. Nobody, wouldn't it be cool if this resulted in a moment where, in reverse, Yamato as Oden, remembering Mr. Nobody's kindness, becomes captivated by Zoro as the spitting image of Mr. Nobody? But with that aside, another question that I have is whether Yamato was able to escape back then and go on the run, or did Yamato's life just consist of going in and out of imprisonment? And whilst most of the flashback shows us what a horrible father Kaido is, we gotta give some props to Kaido's confidence. Being so assured of his own strength to give back the samurais their swords was pretty impressive and hypes up Kaido to say the least. But moving on, whilst the last couple of chapters gave us Monster Trio hype, chapter 1024 gave us an update on the rest of the Straw Hats. And you know me, if you give me some focus on the Straw Hats, I'm a happy, nay, joyful girl. With the Yamato and Kaido flashback and fight providing the hype and the heartfelt moments, this earlier segment of the chapter gave us moments of comedy and giddiness. The giddiness I'm referring to came largely from seeing Jinbei communicate with the rest of the crew. It was such a refreshing sight and really now makes you feel like Jinbei is well and truly one of the Straw Hats. I loved seeing the Straw Hats working together, with Frankie leading the charge to ensure that Zoro and Sanji's battle with the All-Stars are uninterrupted, signifying their belief in the ability of the two wings, and Brook carrying Robin and ensuring her safety, which yes does raise the concern for her fate because it does strengthen my idea that she may become the target of CP0. And of course we have to give our props to Usopp. You know my take has been that Usopp will be receiving another epithet that will make people mistake him for someone else, and in this chapter he gets the new name of the Beast Hunter, which the additional notes contextualizes is actually a reference to two of the Tobiroppo. So this will lead to a massive upsurge in his bounty for his mistaken identity and his mistaken conqueror's haki, which has me questioning what's actually happening with Big Mom and in the front with Kid and Law, which I imagine we will be seeing soon, especially because we also got an update on the Kid and Heart pirates who are helping fight the Beast pirates. But the thing that really excites me about this segment is that this seems to be leading up to all the Straw Hats joining up and regrouping in one spot. And I will save my excitement for when that actually happens, but you better believe we're getting that moment, and I, for one, cannot wait. We also got part 2 of the poster of the top 50 One Piece characters, and I love how Oda composed all of this. Seeing a tiny whoop slap on Going Mary's head makes me think that Oda got wind of the Grand Line Reviews campaign, and this is Oda's way of trolling trolling Liam back by including Whoop Slap, but in a very hidden way where you really have to squint to see him. The tease of Frankie and Kid having a battle of the robotic arms, which I love the idea of, even the composition of the Straw Hats in the middle together, and then a hidden Bon Clay who is a fan favorite honorary Straw Hat. And just like how we got Sanji's fiery Diable Jumbo leg peeking in part 1, which seems we have Sabo with his pipe and Merimero no Mi in the bottom right corner of this week, so I can't wait to see the final installment. Our monster trio is also the feature of the Jump magazine cover in celebration of One Piece's 100th volume, and I just want to say a big thank you to Oda, and if I have ever wanted to live in Japan for more direct access to One Piece culture, then it's now, because there seems like there are special edition One Piece figurines available, and also because I want to join in such a massive celebration. But for now, let me know what you think by leaving a comment below. Don't forget to like and share the video, and please do subscribe for more One Piece content, because the last couple of chapters brought out a lot of discussion points that I would love to continue discussing with you guys. We'll also be holding a chapter discussion stream once the official translation is out, so make sure to check out the link for that below. Please join our Joyfleet Discord server where you can participate in fun activities like our games night, as well as the artwork competition like these talented members, and become a patron if you would like a special role within that server. On that note, thank you to our patrons who help support the channel. This is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.